Chapter 452. Damn it! Dragon of Origin. The green figure said viciously as he sat weakly in his own temple. This figure was the forest god Canis, who had taken Rick's right arm. However, his tone was rather strange. If Wuming was here, he would definitely recognize this tone. This was Canis, who had just been destroyed by Wuming and replicated by Arthas' body. Arthas had rejected the Star Cup. In order to ensure that he could come out of the Earth's core, the Star Cup's consciousness chose another god, which was Canis. The Star Cup's consciousness used the Star Cup's power to erase Canis' personality, and then took control of Canis' body. However, unlike replicating Arthas' body, the Star Cup's consciousness simply controlled it and did not integrate itself into it. This was also why Canis, who had taken Rick's body by surprise, was expressionless. After that, when Wuming was fighting with the Star Cup's consciousness, in order to not let Canis escape, Wuming used his familiar authority that he had not used for a long time. When he killed Neza in the God Slayer world, Neza wanted to continue fooling around and did not want to return to the myths, so he turned into Wuming's authority, which was a familiar with self-awareness. Then Wuming released Neza to stop Canis. Canis, who had temporarily lost the control of the Star Cup's consciousness, was judged to automatically attack the enemy, so he fought with Neza. Simply put, it's hanging up the phone, for all. Then, because the battle between Wuming and the Star Cup's consciousness was too intense, Canis and Neza were blown away and continued to fight in the center of the Yar-Ala continent. The burn marks on her body were left by Neza, so using the fire-tipped spear to deal with the forest god was the most appropriate choice. Then, when Wuming crushed Arthas' body that the Star Cup's consciousness had replicated, the Star Cup's consciousness that controlled Canis' body escaped. However, the real result was that the Star Cup's consciousness came to Canis' body and completely took control of her body. It could be said that the Star Cup's consciousness begging for mercy was purely an act for Wuming to see. Its purpose was to make Wuming think that the Star Cup's consciousness was really dead. After all, even Wuming had praised the Star Cup's consciousness as a wise one. In terms of hypostasis, the Star Cup's consciousness should be half a level of suppression, so of course it would not be so weak. Although it had been a noob for a long time. Although forest god's body's body, it's not weak, I'll just make do with it. After all, the forest god was a master of 186 spells. He could cast 186 types of spells at the same time. He was one of the best among the gods. Because Canis the Star Cup's consciousness, Canis's consciousnesses as well. He can't control the Star Cup anyway, so I don't need to be in a hurry. Once I recover, I'll touch the Star Cup and use Canis' body to become the only god. Because the Star Cup's consciousness previously controlled Arthas' body, was a defective copy of the Star Cup's consciousness. It could not be recognized as a god by the Star Cup's consciousness. Therefore, the Star Cup's consciousness was not the only god. The reason it did not directly use Canis' body to become the only god was because Canis' body was too weak. Moreover, the Star Cup's consciousness thought that it could defeat Wuming. In the end, it failed. Although I'm now free from the Star Cup, Arthas is dead. As long as this body is fine, the final victor will still be me. After all, Wuming was not qualified to become the only god on this planet. Other than Arthas and Wuming, the Star Cup's consciousness did not care about the other gods. They're just a bunch of fools who don't know how to use their wisdom. They're nothing to worry about. The Star Cup's consciousness laughed when it thought of the other gods. Even those who were called gods were a bunch of simple-minded people, who only knew how to flaunt their innate abilities. Now that the Star Cup has fallen into his hands, for safety's sake, I'd better stay in this body obediently and wait for him to leave. The Star Cup's consciousness said. After all, we can't use the Star Cup. For the sake of humans, he would not take the Star Cup away. He would definitely leave the Star Cup for the humans. However, Wuming did not know that humans could not use the Star Cup either. I really want to see his expression when he finds out that humans can't use the Star Cup. It'll be very interesting, the Star Cup's consciousness said with a smile. Then, the Star Cup's consciousness controlled Canis' body, and destroyed the statue of Canis that was used for worship with magic. It sat on the platform of the statue, and began to repair the body. Canis' body was like a vacuum cleaner that was turned on to its maximum capacity. It could be seen with the naked eye that Kaina's body was madly absorbing the spirits in the air. Not only was its spirit injured by Wuming, but its body was also injured by Neza. Therefore, the Star Cup's consciousness needed to recuperate. Now, Kaina's body was an existence that would burp if it was hit by the Void Zeroth ward or marrow explosion. Therefore, the Star Cup's consciousness needed to heal the injuries of this body. As a natural god, Kainas and other god species naturally had an advantage. As long as they absorbed the spirits in the air, they would be able to slowly recover from their injuries. After all, there was still someone in the outside world that was not to be trifled with. This place was the capital of the forest elves. The chances of someone breaking in were almost zero. Therefore, the Star Cup's consciousness could safely absorb the spirits to heal its injuries. Then, the Star Cup's consciousness that was absorbing the spirits suddenly realized that there was something wrong with these spirits. It was just like when you drank ordinary milk and realized that the milk tasted strange. Then, before the Star Cup's consciousness could react, Kaina's body suddenly exploded. Bang! The explosion of Kaina's body caused the entire temple of Kainas to collapse. The forest goblins and forest goblins who were guarding the outside were all in a panic. The temple of the god they worshipped was blown up, and that was a big deal. The temple had always been the place where the forest elves communicated with Kainas, but now it had exploded. This was no less than the collapse of the family's ancestral hall. It was a heavy blow to the people. As the forest elves panicked and tried to rescue them, Shinka Nilbar hid in a house not far from the temple, and looked at the collapsed temple with cold eyes. Sucking in a fairy that was activated by my Zeroth ward of the void, plus you're heavily injured. What a pity. Lord God, you're finally going to die by my hands. Xian Ku's expression darkened as she spoke, which made the girl behind her a little scared. This way we can be together, Nina. Say, Senior. The girl called Nina looked at her senior nervously. Her body kept trembling. Perhaps she would be very lucky in the future. At the same time, Wuming, who was still checking the Star Cup, suddenly noticed that something was wrong with the Star Cup. You finally came out, Star Cup's consciousness. Chapter 453. Wuming looked at the tiny Xingchui on his huge dragon claw, and breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know why he couldn't find it before, Wuming finally found Xingchui's consciousness. I thought you really disappeared, but it turns out you were still hiding. After all, Wuming didn't believe that the death of a mere body could kill Xingchui's consciousness. Sure enough, after Wuming's perseverance, Xingchui's consciousness finally came out. Damn. Forest elves. Xingchui's consciousness said weakly. Previously, because Wuming destroyed its body, Xingchui's consciousness was weakened. This time, it was plotted against in the Temple of Kainas, and now Xingchui's consciousness could no longer stay awake. The Star Cup's consciousness that absorbed the spirit to heal its injuries was like in 4 drip, but someone injected poison into the 4 drip, and all the absorbed spirit was detonated by the Zeroth ward of void. Kainas was completely dead, and the Star Cup's consciousness returned to the Star Cup because it had nowhere to go. However, it really didn't expect that the forest elves would attack their creator, forest god Kainas. Although Xingchui's consciousness didn't pay much attention to Kainas, Kainas was also an evil god, so why would someone want to kill her? All kinds of questions troubled Xingchui's consciousness, but now, Xingchui's consciousness didn't have time to think about other things. If it didn't solve the crisis in front of it, it would really die. Xingchui's consciousness didn't think that Wuming, who could mix a shielding technique into a space lock technique, wouldn't use a technique that targeted its spiritual body, which was its consciousness. Wait. I have something to say. Xingchui's consciousness, who knew that it was already at the end of the road, quickly said. Do you still want to say something? But I won't give you the chance. Wuming finally understood that the victor was the righteous one, while the villains died because they talked too much, laughing emoji. Goodbye. Immediately afterward, Wuming took advantage of the fact that his sorcerer avatar was still active and chanted the spell again. Noble and powerful, wise and kind. Thus, I shall become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. In an instant, Wuming's inner stone plate, which represented the sorcerer's incarnation, turned red. A large amount of mana surged into the star cup. Then, in the silence of the star cup's consciousness, which had become even more muddled due to its weakened state, Wu-Ming completely eliminated it. Although it was a bit anticlimactic, it's finally over. Wu-Ming complained as he looked to the east. Just like what Wu-Ming knew, the sun appeared from the east. At this time, Wu-Ming just happened to catch the sunrise. Watching the sunrise, Wu-Ming logged out of the dragon seed avatar. Wu-Ming's gigantic dragon body slowly turned into the size of a human. He once again regained his black-haired, red-eyed, and cloaked appearance. Then, Wu-Ming clutched his head in pain. Ugh. The burden is a little too much. The reason why he said that was because more than half of Wu-Ming's 12 avatars were now in a state of overload. Overload's red alert state was not the end of it. It also caused damage to Wu-Ming's spirit and body. After all, that avatar was not the real body, but a substitute made by Wu-Ming. Previously, because of the battle with Artemis, Wu-Ming caused his two avatars, the Titan and the Sun, to fall into a red alert state and temporarily could not be used. In order to eliminate the aftermath of the battle between the two, Wu-Ming used the combination of Annihilation and Flood. And at the same time, those two avatars also fell into a red alert state. After all, if it was only Annihilation, it would not be able to reach the range. And if it was only Flood, it would not be able to eliminate the aftermath, so he had to combine the two. Because Wu-Ming's avatar could only use one avatar at a time, using two avatars together directly entered a red alert state. After that, in order to save Rick, Wu-Ming's Phoenix was also unable to be used. Otherwise, Wu-Ming wouldn't have to chase after Star Cup's consciousness, he could just use Phoenix to catch it. Fortunately, Wu-Ming's avatar was not counted in the number of avatars he could use. Otherwise, Wu-Ming would not be able to use other avatars the moment his avatar was on the ground. After that, Wu-Ming used Dragon Seed to restore his body to a state where he could use multiple avatars for a short time. With that, Wu-Ming secretly used Sorcerer's avatar to set up a space blockade and a space shielding technique. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness did not notice it was because Sorcerer's avatar's casting effect was enhanced. After that, because he needed to destroy Artemis's avatar that Star Cup's consciousness copied, Storm and Thunder God also fell into a red alert state for the time being. In addition to Warrior's avatar, Wu-Ming had a total of 8 avatars in overload. Previously, Star Cup's consciousness provoked Wu-Ming with words, which made Wu-Ming angry, and then attacked Wu-Ming with Firing Needle. At that time, Wu-Ming used Warrior's avatar to seal Firing Needle. After all, Wu-Ming was also a man who fought Artemis before, so he was very familiar with Firing Needle. Although Wu-Ming's warrior avatar evolved from Welaslana's warrior avatar, unlike Welaslana's warrior avatar, he didn't need to chant to use it on the enemy, he only needed to know the knowledge to use it. However, because it was instantaneous, and because of the power of Firing Needle, Warrior's avatar also fell into overload. And Sorcerer's avatar also fell into overload because of Star Cup's consciousness just now. Now Wu-Ming only had 3 avatars left, Dragon Seed, Dependent and Vitality. 9 avatars fell into overload. Because of that, Wu-Ming felt very uncomfortable, both physically and mentally. After all, Wu-Ming's mental power was quite strong, and he meditated every day. At that moment he just felt a little tired. On the contrary, his physical body had some problems. Because this body was made, not only could it not allow Wu-Ming to exert his full strength, but its physical strength was also far inferior to his original body. 9 of the 12 avatars fell into overload, and Wu-Ming felt extremely painful. Looking at Star Cup in his hand, Wu-Ming threw it casually, and golden ripples swallowed Star Cup. Then Wu-Ming opened the portal, found a plane, and sat cross-legged. I'd better heal my injuries first. The reason why he didn't sit on the ground was because the battlefield just now had turned into an ocean. The one with the supreme divine power. The god protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him, like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. As soon as Sorcerer's avatar finished speaking, the elves between heaven and earth began to surge, but Wu-Ming did not absorb those elves. First of all, what Wu-Ming needed was magical power, not elves. Second, those elves were alive. If possible, Wu-Ming would not hurt them. In that way, Wu-ming closed his eyes and began to recover. And those elves wrapped around Wu-ming's body as if they were protecting him. A little bit of starlight danced with the divine person. Chapter 454. Vitality Avatar's characteristic. If there is energy that can be absorbed, it will speed up the recovery speed. Even if there is no magical power in this world, there is only elves, but fortunately, Wu-ming's Vitality Avatar can heal Wu-ming's injuries without energy, so it's not a big deal at all. After almost an hour, Wu-ming's injuries were almost healed. Feeling his heart, Wu-ming found that the red color of the stone plate that entered the state of overload was fading little by little at this moment. It seems that Vitality Avatar can also relieve the overload of other avatars. Although this was the case, Wu-ming also stopped activating Vitality Avatar. At present, his physical and mental aspects are almost recovered, and there is no need to restore those avatars at this time. After all, Star Cup is still in my hands, I can't use it, and humans can't use it either. I have to think of a way. Star Cup's consciousness said before that Wu-ming can't become the only god of this planet, and he can't control Star Cup, and humans are the same. Although Wu-ming didn't think what Star Cup's consciousness told him was a lie, but to be on the safe side, Wu-ming still checked Star Cup after getting it. Wu-ming indeed can't control Star Cup, maybe because Wu-ming himself is not a native of this world. And as for whether humans can control Holy Cup, Wu-ming doesn't know after all. Star Cup's consciousness said so. If humans are not recognized by Star Cup, it is likely that humans can't become the ruler of this planet, just like what Star Cup's consciousness said. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. With that said, Wu-ming withdrew from his inner world and opened his eyes. When Wu-ming observed his inner stone plate, he sensed that some people came from the outside world, but because the other party was not malicious, Wu-ming didn't care. However, it was not good to just leave those people alone, so he was ready to come out to meet them at this time. Then he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Wu-ming opened his eyes and saw many little angels in front of him. Ahem. They were the infant version of Sky Wings, and a huge fantasy breed that looked like a floating island, Abendheim. Anyone who saw this scene would be given a fright. Nearly 10,000 Skywings were collectively kneeling on this vast plain. It was a spectacular sight. It was a good thing that Silent Cry had randomly chosen a plain. Otherwise, the Skywings would not have been able to collectively kneel here. Moreover, with Abendheim around, this plain seemed a little small. Why are you here? Wu-ming subconsciously asked when he saw the Skywings half kneeling on the ground with their heads lowered. Although Wu-ming sensed that someone was coming, he didn't expect there to be so many of them. When Wu-ming didn't release his psychic power, he only maintained a vague sense of perception. Therefore, when Wu-ming opened his eyes, he was shocked. Soon after, Azrael, who was at the front of the Skywings, answered Wu-ming. Lord Arthas has entrusted us to you. From now on, Lord Wu-ming will be our new master. Azrael said expressionlessly but respectfully. As the first Skywing breed created by Arthas, Azrael was the equivalent of the big sister of the Skywings. Thus, with Arthas dead, Azrael was the leader. That's true. Arthas has entrusted you all to me, Wu-ming said and began to ponder. Wu-ming did not know if the Skywing breed's personalities were like Arthas, where the strong were respected, but since Arthas was worried about his creations, Wu-ming believed that although these Skywings had been entrusted to Wu-ming by Arthas, they might not be calm on the inside. Having become the subordinates of the enemy who had killed their master, and having been entrusted to do so by their master, Wu-ming did not believe that the Skywings could be as heartless as the Triumph breeds. Ahem. Although it wasn't very nice to say that about the Triumph breeds, aside from Shiobi, the rest of the Triumph breeds were truly heartless. Wu-ming released his mental energy and probed the tens of thousands of Skywings in front of him, discovering some clues. Every Skywing breed had a sad expression on their faces, and Wu-ming could tell that they wanted to commit suicide. The reason why they had been able to follow Azrael to Wu-ming was very likely because they had to obey their master's final order. This was no good. Putting aside whether or not Wu-ming would order them to do some missions, in this state, they might not be able to survive in battle. 90% of those whose hearts were already dead would die in that battle. The remaining 10% were those who were strong enough to survive even if they fought absent-mindedly. Instantly, Wuming came up with a good idea. "Raise your heads, Skywings." Wuming used his magic and softly said. But his voice still reached the ears of every Skywing breed. The Skywings raised their heads and expressionlessly looked at Wuming. "Arthas is a worthy opponent, but the two of us have our reasons for fighting." Arthas was doing it for his lifelong wish, while Wuming was doing it for Arthas not to snatch the Star Cup. In the end, Arthas's death could be considered an accident. Wuming had not expected Arthas's spirit essence to be sealed into the throne by the Star Cup's consciousness. If Wuming had really wanted to kill Arthas, he would not have used the power of the flood and annihilation to eliminate the aftermath of their battle. "I won't pretend to be polite with you. Arthas's death is truly an accident." When Wuming said this, not only did the Skywings who had thoughts of committing suicide become angry, even the Skywings who wanted to obey Arthas's final order frowned, especially Azrael. "But I won't shirk my responsibility. I'll take on this responsibility and the task my friend Arthas entrusted to me." After all, the two of them had hit it off immediately after the battle. Regardless of whether Arthas died or not, the friendship between the two of them was inseparable. Have hope for the future. Don't give up on your lives, because I'll always be waiting for you. I'll wait for you to challenge me until you kill me. Wuming's words caused an uproar among the Skywings. Even Abbentheim was shaken. It was clear that he was not calm. "You guys also want to avenge Arthas, right? As one of his murderers, you'll definitely choose to avenge him if you can." Wuming was like a demon, tempting the Skywings. "I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you guys have practically unlimited lifespans? Then let your own blade be your lifelong goal." Almost every Skywing excitedly flapped their wings. Some really wanted to kill Wuming, while others were excited to be able to challenge an expert like Wuming. Azrael's eyes widened as she stared at her current master in shock. As the big sister, how could she not see that Wuming was giving the Skywings hope and a goal to live on? Apart from Azrael, quite a few of the more senior Skywings also saw Wuming's intentions. Perhaps letting him become the new master of the Skywings wasn't a bad idea. Afterward, the Skywings spoke in unison. "As you command, my lord." Chapter 455. After that, Wuming brought the Skywing breeds back to Abbentheim, and began to use Abbentheim's restoration technique to heal the Skywing breeds. After using all their strength, the Skywing breeds would turn into a 10-year-old child, and enter a weakened state. Wuming even suspected that Arthas was a Lilicon. In this weakened state, the Skywing breed's combat strength would be greatly reduced. It could be said that even the weakest human in this world could kill a Skywing breed. In response to this, the Skywing species used a technique to develop a set of equipment specifically designed to speed up their recovery. After the Skywing breeds used up all their strength and turned into children, they would need about 50 years to recover to their original state. Of course, this number was under the condition that there was no external force, and the Skywing breeds relied on their own strength to recover. With the Skywing breed's belligerent nature, they would not be able to fight freely for 50 years. However, this was how the restoration technique was created. Through a special technique, the Skywing breeds developed a device that could speed up the recovery of the Skywing breeds after using up all their strength. In just a few days, the Skywing breeds could completely recover what would take 50 years to recover. Not only that, but if they were heavily injured, they could also go to the restoration technique to recover. Simply put, it was like the spring in the game. However, because there were not many devices, they could only be used in batches. It would probably take several months for the nearly 10,000 Skywing breeds to recover. Wuming looked at the device in front of him. One by one, the Skywing breeds floated in the device, and the spirit around them accelerated into their bodies. Wuming had some ideas. The Skywing breeds shrank because they ran out of energy, and this device is used to speed up their absorption of spirit. "So that's how it works," Wuming said after seeing through the mechanism of the device. "Your judgment is correct, Sir Wuming. This is the mechanism of our Skywing breed's restoration technique." Meow. Azrael, who had been following Wuming, said with a strange tone. Wu-ming looked at Azriel with a strange expression. Why didn't Azriel use the word meow before, but now? Could it be that she had forgotten because she was too sad? Wu-ming thought as he looked at Azriel. Master Wu-ming, what's wrong meow? Azriel stared at Wu-ming with her big cute eyes and asked curiously. No, nothing. Wu-ming shook his head. Wu-ming felt that if he continued to ask, it might be very bad, so he didn't ask. It was just a habit. By the way, Azriel, come with me. Wu-ming turned and walked towards a corner behind him. Meow. Is Lord Wu-ming going to attack me? For my sisters, I'm willing to go through fire and water today, meow. Azriel instantly acted as if she was about to be defiled, and then acted as if she was willing to go through fire and water to die a heroic death. What are you thinking about? It's just an experiment. Wu-ming turned his head and looked helplessly at Azriel, who was possessed by a drama queen, and complained. Experiment, meow? Azriel was puzzled. Although she had been acting just now, Azriel's puzzled expression was real. She was puzzled by Wu-ming's experiment. However, although she did not understand or know what the experiment was, Azriel still obediently followed Wu-ming to a corner. Are you ready, Azriel? Wu-ming pretended to be serious as he looked at Azriel. I'm ready, meow. Azriel said nervously. It could not be helped. Who asked Wu-ming to be so serious? Then, Wu-ming began to chant. The one who has the supreme divine power, the god protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him. Like a fountain of vitality that is constantly surging, grant the world equal protection. After Wu-ming finished chanting, his body began to glow. Then Wu-ming put his palm on Azriel's head. With Azriel's current height, Wu-ming could just touch Azriel's small head when he raised his hand. In an instant, the light on Wu-ming's body passed through Wu-ming's arm on Azriel's head. Immediately afterward, countless elves gathered, creating a strong whirlwind. Azriel and Wu-ming were like the eye of the storm, attracting countless elves with them as the center. Azriel was growing a little bit bigger, but the speed was very slow. After seeing the effect, Wu-ming increased the output of vitality incarnation. Then in just a few breaths, Azriel grew back to her original state. In short, Azriel recovered from the state of a 10-year-old child to the state of a 16-year-old girl. Sure enough, vitality incarnation was also useful for the Skywing race. Wu-ming said in his heart. Immediately afterward, Wu-ming put down his hand on Azriel's head, and then said to Azriel, "Check if you have recovered, Azriel." Azriel reacted instantly, and began to feel her physical condition. Azriel was stunned from the beginning. If it weren't for Wu-ming's words, it would have taken her a while to recover. Meow. I've actually fully recovered, meow. Azriel shouted excitedly after feeling the state of her body. My lord. Thank you very much, meow. Azriel knelt on one knee to Wu-ming. Wu-ming smiled. After all, as the eldest sister, you can't do anything without recovering your strength. The reason why Azriel followed Wu-ming was that she didn't want to enter the recovery device herself. She wanted to give the few places to enter the recovery device for recovery to the other sisters. Power is used to protect. Only by mastering power can you protect the people you want to protect. Wu-ming's words reminded Azriel of Arthas. Her Skywing race failed to protect Arthas. Then Azriel looked at Wu-ming. Although Sir Arthas's death is related to Sir Wu-ming, Sir Arthas did not blame you. Instead, he entrusted us to Sir Wu-ming. Therefore, I persuaded the sisters who opposed and led the Skywing race to find Sir Wu-ming. Azriel got rid of her habit of speaking. When Azriel said this, Wu-ming understood. It turned out that Azriel had done some brainwashing on the Skywing race. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could they so easily submit to their master's enemy, even if it was the original master's order? However, I don't know if it's because Sir Arthas's status is too high, or if it's because I've been bound by the idea of the strong being respected, but I don't feel too much about Sir Arthas's death, nor am I too hostile towards Sir Wu-ming. What I'm thinking about is the future of my sisters. That was why Azriel had brought the Skywing race to Wu-ming so quickly. Wu-ming did not say anything, nor did he interrupt Azriel. He just listened quietly. I've thought about it before. Someone who was entrusted by Sir Arthas can't be too bad. Now that I think about it, it's not unreasonable for Sir Wuming to be able to defeat Sir Arthas. Azriel then smiled sweetly at Wuming. Protecting the thoughts of others. Is that why Sir Wuming is so powerful? I'll remember that. In the future, I'll also protect you. In order to make up for the regret of not being able to protect Sir Arthas, in order to protect Sir Arthas's final order, in order to protect my sisters, and even more so, to protect my dearest master. After Azriel finished speaking, one of the 12 stone plates in Wuming's heart automatically lit up. In an instant, Azriel's eye of the sword, which represented death, began to change. The sword became wider, and it became similar to a shield, which represented protection. Protect me? Wuming really did not think that there would be a day when he would need protection. If that day came, the enemy would not be someone that Azriel could deal with. However, it was her intention. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm waiting for that day. Chapter 456. After coming out of the corner with Azriel, the other Skywings looked curiously at Soundless and Azriel, who had recovered her body. After all, Azriel was still in her infant state. In just a few minutes, Azriel had returned to her original state. Not only that, but Azriel's aura had also become different from before. This could not help but make people. No, it made the Skywings curious. In addition, the gathering of elves and the whirlwind in the corner had also attracted the attention of the Skywings. They were eager to know what had happened. Wuming helplessly looked at the dozens of pairs of wolf-like eyes. I think the Skywings are not thirsting for knowledge, but for the unknown. When they all recover, I must give the order for all of them to learn and collect knowledge. Aren't you all interested in the unknown? Do you know the saying, there's no end to learning? Go and learn. Ahem. Lord Wuming has something important to say. Hurry up and call the others over. Tell everyone that the Skywings in the recovery device should also go and help Meow, because the recovery device was limited. Except for the Skywings who had entered the recovery device and the dozens of Skywings who had stayed behind, the other Skywings returned to their rooms. By the way, the Skywings' rooms did not have doors or windows, and they could only be entered through the Skywings' innate spatial ability. Although they had entered the weak state of a 10-year-old child, the Skywings could still use their spatial ability to enter and exit their homes, although it was very strenuous. Afterward, the Skywings who had stayed behind and the ones in the recovery device left to call for others. The reason for this situation was because of Azriel's suggestion. First, let's talk about the change in Azriel's eyes. Originally, the Skywings' eyes had a sword-like pupil. Now, Azriel's pupil had turned into a shield. This was not entirely accurate. It should be a pupil that was both sword-like and shield-like. To put it simply, it should be similar to a broad-bladed sword. It was the kind of door that could be used as both a sword and a shield. A broad-bladed sword. The reason for that was because of Wuming's avatar, dependence. When Azriel really wanted to submit to Wuming, she happened to have Wuming's magical power in her body, which triggered the ability of dependent. Now Azriel had truly become Wuming's subordinate. Moreover, she had signed a contract and formed a connection with him. Wuming could summon Azriel to help him at any time. In a sense, it was the same as Athena, Guinevere, and Lancelot in the Godslayer world. However, it was more troublesome to summon Athena and the other subordinate deities, while the connection between Azriel and Wuming was brought by the dependent. So Wuming only needed to use the dependent avatar to summon Azriel, which was much more convenient than summoning Athena and the others. Azriel also noticed that she had a connection with Wuming, but because she wanted to be loyal to Wuming, Azriel did not mind at all. Then, Azriel proposed that all the Skywings should sign a contract with Wuming. Wuming was a little reluctant. After all, not all the other Skywings would be willing. The only belief of the Skywings was Arthas, and Wuming did not explain much about Arthas' spirit marrow. So in the Skywings' hearts, Wuming was the murderer of Arthas. The Skywings would follow Wuming nominally, but if they really signed a master-slave contract, Wuming judged that not too many Skywings would accept it. Anyway, that was what Wuming thought, but he could not resist Azriel's half instigation and half coercion. Azrael told Wu Ming that even if he could not form a contract with all of them, he could at least form a contract with some of them. Lord Wu Ming, you're not that bad in the eyes of the Skywings, meow. Besides, you're underestimating the Skywings too much, meow. These were Azrael's exact words. Afterward, Wu Ming and Azrael came together. Of course, it was also necessary to help the Skywing breeds recover. After all, Silent Wonder had agreed to Arthu's request. Now that the Skywing breeds were his kin, he had to treat them better. The Skywings were created god-slaying weapons, so they had strict rules when it came to discipline. Even though there were nearly 10,000 of them, the Skywings quickly gathered. Not long after, all the Skywings were in front of Wu Ming. Because there was not much space on Abantiheim's body, the ground, the air, and the trees were filled with Skywings. They were all waiting for Wu Ming to speak. Wu Ming glanced at Azrael, and she bowed to Wu Ming before retreating behind him. I've gathered everyone here mainly to recover your bodies. Azrael is an example. My authority can have a recovery effect on your bodies, so I wish to recover all of you in one go. The moment Wu Ming said this, almost all the Skywings were stunned. Even their original master, Arthas, could not recover all of them in one go. Also, Azrael has already established a contract with me, so I can summon her at any time. This is also my authority, but Azrael is completely willing. With that said, everyone turned to look at Azrael. Azrael nodded, indicating that she was willing to do so. It would be bad if the Skywings mistakenly believed that Wu Ming was forcing Azrael. Arthas didn't tell you, so you might not know. I'm a god from another world, and I might need helpers from time to time. After all, there might not be any more wars in this world, so I wish to sign a contract with all of you. However, this won't be forced. Those who aren't willing can leave now. In a while, I will restore the bodies of those who aren't willing. And for those who are willing, I will establish a contract when I restore your bodies. With that, Wu Ming waited for the Skywings to move. The reason there would not be any more wars was that Wu Ming had decided to find a god that could replace him as the only god and forbid war in this world. This could be considered as taking care of the humans a little. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he realized that not a single Skywing moved. Wu Ming frowned as he looked at the Skywings. Thinking that he had not made himself clear, Wu Ming spoke again. Did I not make myself clear? Those who aren't willing can leave. My lord, we are willing. Nearly 10,000 Skywings said in unison. With nearly 10,000 mouths speaking at the same time, Wu Ming was given a fright. That's why I said, Lord Wu Ming, don't underestimate us Skywings, meow. Azrael looked at Wu Ming gloatingly and said, we won't disobey Lord Wu Ming's final order. Even if we do, we'll submit because of Lord Wu Ming's order, meow. I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you have almost unlimited lifespans? Then make killing me with your own hands your lifelong goal. This was Wu Ming's order. We can't follow you to another world, so we can't fulfill this order. What if you don't come back, Lord Wu Ming? Azrael was like a fox that had just eaten grapes, smiling at Wu Ming. Azrael was right. After all, Wu Ming was not a native of this world. Wu Ming had his own world, and he needed to go back. Although he would return to this world, he would not be able to do so many times. Besides, there are plenty of Skywings who have submitted to your spirit, meow. The Skywings were not idiots. Wu Ming had given them motivation and a goal to live on. At the start, many of the Skywings could tell. Now that they had calmed down, they more or less understood Wu Ming's words. With a series of reasons such as I'll definitely fulfill this order. Thank you for giving us a new goal to live on. And Lord Wu Ming's words must be obeyed. The Skywings completely accepted Wu Ming's contract. Wu Ming smiled. That guy Artreus really has a bunch of awesome children. Even I'm a little jealous. Then let's begin. Restore your bodies and contract. With that, Wu Ming raised his hand. Wait a moment. At this moment, an extremely pleasant voice was heard. Chapter 457. With that pleasant voice, a figure flapping its wings landed in front of Wu Ming. She was wearing the same clothes as the other Skywings, with socks of different lengths and colors. She was even wearing only one shoe. She had a long hem and a pair of small wings at her waist, which made one wonder if she could fly. She had orange eyes that leaned toward gold, and her eyes were filled with death. She had long pink hair that glowed with fluorescent light, and a halo that resembled a magic array on one side of her head, making her look extremely mysterious. Wu-Ming could not help but sigh in admiration. They really were sisters. Azriel's clothes were similar to the girls, and aside from her heterochromatic eyes, her hair color being different from the girls, her halo being more complicated, and her face being a little different, Wu-Ming would believe that the two of them were sisters. On the other hand, because the other Skywings had always been in the shape of children, Wu-Ming could not tell how similar they were. Thus, Wu-Ming chose a Skywing that was the same size as Azriel, and he began to compare them. However, there were a few things that caught Wu-Ming's attention. The Skywing girl's figure was as graceful as an angel's, but her eyes were as cruel as a demon's, and her entire body reeked of blood. Although the Skywings were all 16 or 17-year-old girls, because of the war they were filled with ruthlessness and death, and Azriel was no exception. However, the Skywing in front of Wu-Ming had a more ruthless and bloodthirsty aura than the other Skywings. She was undoubtedly known as a god-slaying weapon. Wu-Ming looked into her eyes. Although she was smiling, the death in her eyes was no less than the other Skywings. In fact, the other Skywings could not even catch up to her. This was an extremely dangerous fellow, more dangerous than any of the Skywing species present. This was Wu-Ming's conclusion. Even more interesting was that she did not have the body of a child like the other Skywings. Instead, she had the body of a normal girl like Azriel. Little G, why are you only back now? Where did you run off to earlier, meow? Azriel had a look of exasperation on her face, as she spoke to the Skywing girl, known as Little G. I was attracted by the battle between Lord Arthas and Lord Wu-Ming then. I was sent flying by the shockwaves of the battle. I happened to meet a strange human with a broken arm, so I played with him a little. The girl called Koji smiled sweetly at Azriel. Wu-Ming, on the other hand, found some clues from these words. Based on her words, Wu-Ming could tell that she had been drawn over while Wu-Ming and Arthas were fighting. This meant that she had spatial abilities that surpassed other Skywing species. Otherwise, she would not have noticed the fight between Wu-Ming and Arthas. Afterward, she might have been sent flying by the shockwaves of the spatial explosion, which was why she did not follow Azriel and the others to find Wu-Ming. Furthermore, Wu-Ming could sense that this Skywing was much stronger than Azriel's. Furthermore, this Skywing did not have the slightest hint of violence. Furthermore, this Skywing was able to leave a Bonteheim on her own accord. Furthermore, this Skywing had not transformed due to exhaustion. There was no doubt that this Skywing was unique. Lord Wu-Ming, she is Gabriel, the final Skywing species created by Lord Arthas. She is the final product of an alien being. It can be said that she is stronger than any of us Skywings, and there is an example of her single-handedly conquering a superior race. Wu-Ming immediately understood. It was no wonder she was so special. It turned out that she was an alien being created by Arthas. Under normal circumstances, the first and last products were both special. As the first product, Azriel had the authority to command the Skywings, while Gabriel, as the final product of an alien being, had the greatest strength. However, the fact that her body had not changed caused Wu-Ming to misunderstand. Why was Gabriel called an alien being? It was because she was an alien being. As god-slaying weapons, the Skywings naturally had strict team assignments. Meanwhile, Gabriel did not have a team and acted alone. It was very likely because of this that Gabriel did not participate in the release of Pseudo-Godstrike. However, this did not surprise Wu-Ming. Gabriel's lack of participation was very likely due to Azriel's orders. No matter how stupid Azriel was, she would not let all the Skywings fall into a weakened state. Gabriel was the backup plan that Azriel had left behind. Wu-Ming's guess was not wrong. Due to Gabriel's stubbornness, she left a Bonteheim, and Azriel could no longer care about Gabriel. She brought a Bonteheim and all the Skywings to Wu-Ming. After that, Gabriel found a Bonteheim and returned. Wu-Ming did not think that Gabriel did not know about Arthas' death, but from her expression and aura, as well as the emotions she displayed, Gabriel did not seem too sad. However, Wu-Ming did not pay attention to that. What Gabriel had just said concerned Wu-Ming. You said that you met a human with a severed arm. Where is he? Wu Ming looked at Gabriel solemnly. Unsurprisingly, the human with a severed arm that Gabriel had met was Rick. Wu Ming had sent Rick directly to Lucia. Only the heavens knew how Gabriel had managed to get there. Even if she had been affected by Wu Ming and Arthas' spatial oscillation, could she have made it that far? The reason was simple. Gabriel had wanted to use her spatial ability to enter the space where Wu Ming and Arthas had fought, which was Arthas' war god shrine. However, a spatial explosion had happened at that time, and due to the instability of space, Gabriel had been sent away by the spatial oscillation. She should be considered lucky, but she had made it in time for Wu Ming and Arthas' spatial oscillation. She should be considered unlucky, but she had run into Rick, who had been sent away by Wu Ming. As the most god-slaying skywings, what they loved to do the most was collect the heads of various races as spoils of war. They would not let their enemies off just because they were weak or strong. That was why Wu Ming was a little worried that Gabriel would make a move on Rick. Gabriel smiled sweetly at Wu Ming and explained, Wu Ming. Don't worry, Lord Wu Ming. Because he has the aura of your power on him. I only teased him a little and did not harm him. Indeed, Rick's severed right arm still had traces of mana leaked from Desireless arm. If not for a special method, it would take a few days for the residual mana to dissipate. Thank you for not attacking him. He's my friend. Wu Ming's tone relaxed, no longer feeling as oppressive as before. It's what I should do, Gabriel said gracefully. Gabriel then revealed a dangerous look. Then Lord Wu Ming, let's talk about the contract. Chapter 458. For her to stand up at this time, there was no doubt that she had some objections to Wu Ming's contract. I heard that Sir Arthas has entrusted us to you. Since that's the case, I'll definitely abide by this rule. However, the contract you speak of isn't an ordinary one. Giliel continued in an elegant and pleasant voice. Giliel's meaning was very simple. A contract was not that simple. Please allow me to ask a question. If I sign a contract with you, will I truly become your subordinate? Giliel asked. Wu Ming naturally understood what Giliel meant. She wanted to ask whether this was a simple summoning contract or a true master-slave contract. If it was just a summoning contract, then the Skywings would only be summoned, but if it was a true master-slave contract, they might not even have the ability to resist after signing the contract. In serious cases, they might not even be able to commit suicide. However, the other Skywings did not seem to care about this. It was as if they were really weapons, as they quietly listened to the conversation between Wu Ming and Giliel. It's not a summoning contract but a master-slave contract. I can summon you through this contract, and you can transfer your power to me. I can also bestow my power to you. Currently, I know of these abilities. Azrael is an example, Wu Ming calmly said. He then began to transfer his power to Azrael. Bang! As if she had been cast by a red devil, Azrael's body erupted with powerful magic, creating a whirlwind that engulfed the surroundings. That's truly powerful power, Giliel said with a smile when she sensed that Azrael's power had increased by a large margin. Giliel could sense that Azrael's power had vaguely surpassed hers. However, you can be at ease. The contract will only be effective on creatures that sincerely wish to submit to me. After signing the contract with me, although I can't directly kill you, I can still control you to a certain extent. Of course, if you feel that this contract is too overbearing, you can choose to refuse to sign the contract with me, Wu Ming explained to the Skywings once more. There's no need to say such things, Sir Wu Ming. The Skywing sisters will definitely obey Sir Arthas's orders and treat you as their new master. So they'll definitely agree to sign the contract with you, Giliel said with a smile. I'm only asking because I need confirmation. After all, I have to ensure the future of my clansmen. If I've offended you, please punish me. Seeing Giliel's apologetic look, Wu Ming simply waved his hand. There's no need for punishment. You're not wrong. Then, Sir Wu Ming, would you be willing to fight with me? As if she had already expected Wu Ming's answer, Giliel smiled and looked at Wu Ming. However, the ruthlessness and deathly aura in her eyes became even more intense. Wait a moment, little Giliel. How can you be so rude to Sir Wu Ming, meow? Azrael frowned and said. After being strengthened by Wu Ming's power, she appeared extremely dignified. If only I could get rid of that last quirk. Wu Ming laughed when he heard that. I'm afraid that you wanted to fight with me from the start, Gilio. Indeed, after saying so much, apart from confirming the future of the Skywings, Gilio actually wanted to fight with Wu Ming even more. Although it's a little rude, Sir Wu Ming, I won't lower myself to fight someone I don't agree with, even if it's you who defeated Sir Arthas. Instantly, Gilio's eyes were filled with killing intent. Gilio! Azriel roared at Gilio. This time, Azriel did not use her pet name of Little Gilio, or her quirk of meow. It could be said that Azriel was already angry. You're quite to my liking. Then let's fight. Wu Ming also revealed a smile, as if his interest had been piqued, and he looked at Gilio wantonly. Azriel looked at Wu Ming with some surprise, clearly dissatisfied with Wu Ming's willful answer to Gilio's willful request. Then Wu Ming's Gilio arrived at Wu Ming's inherent barrier. This planet that had already been pierced through could no longer withstand another wave of devastation. So Wu Ming chose his own inherent barrier. Because it was the ability of Anzavulga's staff, the first 8 layers that were destroyed had not yet recovered, unlike the ordinary inherent barrier, which would remain intact after the magician activated it again. Although the 9th and 10th layers were quite narrow, Gilio did not say anything. It was better to say that for Gilio, any kind of battlefield made no difference. While the Skywing species waited patiently, several minutes later, Silent Wonder came out of the inherent barrier with the miniature Gopril in hand. So fast, meow? Azriel had a surprised expression. This opportunity is really careless. She used all her energy to release Heavenly Strike after a few simple exchanges, so naturally, it's going to end soon. After Wu Ming resisted Gilio's attack, Gilio, who had no energy left, could be said to have lost. I'm a little excited, but I didn't expect Wu Ming-sama to be able to resist my Heavenly Strike. Gopril, who was being carried by Silent, wasn't embarrassed at all. Instead, she smiled proudly, as if she had won the match. Although I can't use most of my powers, I can still use magic. When Gilio used Heavenly Strike, Wu Ming entered his magician avatar, and used one sealing technique after another to directly seal Gilio's killing move. After all, in theory, in the face of a tsunami, you only need a flame countless times larger than a tsunami to evaporate the tsunami. Silent had made use of the principle of quantitative change leading to qualitative change. Relying on a magician's extraordinary use of magic sealing spells, he had sealed Jillian's moves. Fortunately, Gilio's Heavenly Strike was just a simple energy attack. If it was a noble phantasm, Wu Ming would not be able to seal it, at least not now. It's really annoying, meow. In short, Kitsune lost, meow. Azriel turned around, and her face instantly became like an idiot. However, because Gilio was being carried by Wu Ming, she did not see Azriel's face and said with a smile, That's right. Wu Ming-sama got my approval. Wu Ming, hurry up and let all of us Skywings sign the contract. Alright, let's do it as soon as possible. Wu Ming also nodded. He had wasted too much time with the Skywings. However, Wu Ming-sama, before that, can you give Kitsune to me for a while, meow? Azriel turned around and looked at Gilio like an idiot. Hey, Senior Azriel, you're like this again. I don't want to be your pillow. Meow, ha ha ha, it's still up to Master Wu Ming, meow. That's enough, you two. There are still so many people watching. Chapter 459. After that, Wu Ming entered Vitality Incarnation and released his mana, enveloping all the Skywings. Immediately afterward, the Skywings returned to their girl forms at a speed visible to the naked eye. But thanks to that, Wu Ming's Vitality Incarnation also entered a red alert state. After all, there were close to 10,000 Skywings. Fortunately, because it was not overloaded, the Vitality Incarnation was only used for a short period of time, so it would recover in a few days. After that, Wu Ming also activated the contract ability of dependence, and all the Skywings accepted the contract without hesitation, including Gapril. By the way, Abbentheim also accepted Wu Ming's contract, and evolved into Wu Ming's guardian beast. After all, which god didn't have a divine beast by his side? Just stay on Abent. In a few days, this world will be brand new. Wuming told the Skywings and was ready to leave. Is Master Wuming going to see that human? Gabriel suddenly asked. Yes, why? Do you want to go with me? Wuming looked at Gabriel. Yes, after all, it's too boring to stay here. Gabriel smiled sweetly at Wuming. However, this made Azrael feel helpless. Master Wuming, if possible, I think it's better for you to take Gabriel with you. First, she can't stay here, and second, with you taking a Skywing guard, you can let the other races know that you are our new master, Meow. In short, it was a declaration of sovereignty. After all, many races had lost their gods. In addition, the battle between Wuming and Artesio must have attracted the attention of other races, and there must be some races who wanted to take the opportunity to join Wuming. After all, almost no one knew that the Star Cup was already in Wuming's hands. Many of those secluded clans did not really want to retire. If they won the Star Cup for their own gods, they would naturally rise in status. Who didn't want status and power? It was just that they couldn't fight anymore, so they had to withdraw from the war. If there was a new incomparably powerful god that was left alone, they would definitely not mind joining him or her, and starting to compete for the Star Cup again. I understand. Gabriel, follow me. Yes, Master Wuming, thank you very much. Because of Azrael's words, Wuming was ready to take Gabriel to a conspicuous place to show the sovereignty of the Skywings. Wuming and Gabriel flew in the sky at a leisurely pace. Master Wuming, how different is your world from this world? Gabriel suddenly asked. Wuming glanced at Gabriel, and found that her eyes were filled with a thirst for knowledge. It was no wonder Gabriel couldn't stay. How could she stay with such a strong thirst for knowledge? My world. You can say that it's completely different from this world, Wuming said as he flew. Oh, then can you tell me? Gabriel's eyes shone like a wolf who had seen meat. Of course, no problem. Let's talk about language first. If not for my innate ability that allows me to communicate with people from different worlds without any obstacles, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to communicate with you. Wuming had been to many places, but he had never encountered a language barrier. There was no doubt that this was a racial innate ability of the origin dragon. Now, Wuming and Gabriel were communicating in the language of the Skywings. Every time he came into contact with a new species, Wuming could always subconsciously speak the language of that species and communicate with them. This could be said to be speaking the human language when you see the human, and the ghost when you see the ghost. After all, Wuming was born from the origin that gave birth to countless worlds and countless origin dragons, so it was reasonable for him to have this ability. But Master Wuming, you speak the language of the Skywings very fluently. Your innate ability is truly miraculous. In this world, because there were various gods, the creatures they created all had their own languages, including humans. Of course, there was also a common language of the continent that had come from who knew where, and it could be said that every species could understand it. Wuming suspected that it was because of this planet. As long as one was a native of this planet, they would definitely be able to understand the common language of the continent. Then, is there a unified language in Master Wuming's world? Gabriel continued to ask. That's not the case. There are many countries and regions in my world. Just like this world, they were also invented by the races of each region. However, in my world, humans make up the majority, and other races are in the minority. Humans also have many races. Wuming began to explain non-stop, telling Gabriel about the world of type moon. Yellow skin, white skin, and black skin? Humans can use magic? Magic? Generally speaking, it's not much different from magic. True ancestors and death apostles. I didn't think that your world would have fantasy breeds. Is this a character named Rune? Indeed, I can feel the tremendous power contained within it. Not long after, Wuming and Gabriel came to an uninhabited forest. Along the way, Wuming told Gabriel many things, and Gabriel listened very carefully to the stories that Wuming told her. This greatly moved Wuming, and he even displayed the Lune runes for Gabriel to admire. After all, anyone would be happy to be able to listen to him so attentively. Just as Gabriel was drooling like an idiot looking at the Lune runes that Wuming drew in the air, she heard a bang, and the Lune runes all disappeared. Master Wuming. Gabriel looked at Wuming with dissatisfaction. Without a doubt, Wuming had put away the Lune runes. Alright, we're done with our stroll. It's time to get down to business. Wuming would not forget about business just because he was having a good time chatting with Gabriel. Yes. Then Master Wuming, you should have summoned me earlier, Gabriel then turned into an idiot again, letting out an extremely idiotic sound. Yes. I got it. Wuming bitterly smiled. He did not see any other skywing species being so curious. Could it be because Gabriel was the final product? Wuming even began to suspect that the skywing species that had robbed the old capital of the forest fairies and stolen all the grimoires was Gabriel. Gabriel's thirst for knowledge was truly too exuberant. Shaking his head, Wuming no longer thought about this. He purposefully looked around before opening a teleportation gate and entering with Gabriel. The spies of the other species hidden in the surroundings wiped off their cold sweat and quickly retreated. All sorts of probing spells were also dispelled. Chapter 460. In a cave, the water around him shimmered with the light of special ores. Rick was still wearing his tattered clothes from the forest god's attack. He sat on a stone bench uneasily. However, he was not alone. In this cave there were other ghosts that Rick had chosen. Rick had asked them to rest in other caves. Rick wanted to be alone in this cave. They were all missing an arm or a leg, but fortunately none of them were missing. Wuming's potion was indeed effective. None of them were crippled or had their skin fester due to the black ash, but they were still missing an arm or a leg. The ghosts did not always apply the black ash. They only applied it when they arrived at their destination and began their mission. This meant that they did not have any black ash on them when they were on their way. Putting aside the demons hidden on the continent, there were also those who were alone or hidden in the path that the ghosts had to pass through. Any single person of another race who accidentally discovered the ghosts was enough to pose a fatal threat to the ghosts. Coupled with the dangerous environment, it was a miracle that the ghosts were only missing an arm or a leg. There were no casualties. This is the possibility of being human. However, in the face of absolute power, we humans are still too weak, Rick said self-deprecatingly when he thought of everyone's efforts. Rick had been returning to this stronghold ever since Wuming teleported him back to Lucia. However, his luck was not good. He ran into a skywing on his way back. How is that possible? Aren't the skywings at war with the forest goblins and goblins? Rick was dumbfounded. Without the black ash, the skywings had long seen through his human identity. Now Rick was prepared to die. Oh, a special human. This feeling of facing death with equanimity. Are you prepared to die? As he had lost his right arm, Rick took out a dagger with his left hand and glared at the skywing in front of him. Although Rick used his left hand to wield the dagger, it did not affect him much. To survive in such a world, it was necessary for both hands to master the way to use weapons. Not a bad eye. Looks like I'll have a decent spoil of war today. The Empyrean Wing smiled. As someone who was very familiar with other races, Rick naturally knew that the spoils of war the skywings were talking about were the severed heads. Well, it just so happens that I have something to do right now. I'll put your head on your neck first. It was as if the Empyrean Wings were playing a prank on him. With a delighted smile, they took to the sky and left. Then Rick slumped to the ground. Although Rick didn't know why the other party had spared him, the most important thing was that he had survived. I wonder how the Villo is doing. Rick began to worry again. No matter how he looked at it, the person who had taken his arm was not someone to be trifled with. Not to mention, Wuming had called her the forest god Canas. Although he did not know if it was the real forest god Canas, Rick knew that the enemy was not to be trifled with. The Earth's core has indeed been pierced through, so the Star Cup should have been released as well. Then the Earth's crust shook violently last night. Could it be that the gods were fighting for the Star Cup? Rick frowned. Rick saw the Earth's core being pierced through, but he did not see who had obtained the Star Cup. Therefore, Rick guessed that the Earth's crust shaking was caused by the gods fighting for the Star Cup. Rick's guess was not wrong. Wuming and the Star Cup's consciousness were indeed fighting for their lives. It was inevitable that whoever won would obtain the Star Cup. However, if you think about it carefully, this is also beneficial to humans. No matter which god gets the Star Cup, the war will naturally end. However, Rick immediately shook his head. A god who can't ensure the safety of humans, possessing the Star Cup is equivalent to giving humans an unprecedented disaster. Rick sighed helplessly. I can only rely on you, Lord God from another world. After all, Rick still dared to prance around under the eyes of a god, but Rick really did not dare to snatch something from a god. It should be said that he could not snatch it. Humans without power could only lead the war to an end. If humans really had the power to change the outcome of the war, then humans would not be where they were today. Then I'm really honored, Rick. Suddenly, Wuming's voice sounded in the cave. Lord God. Rick looked at the source of the voice excitedly, but his voice came to an abrupt stop. It was not because of Wuming, but because a skywing species was following behind Wuming. Moreover, it was the skywing species that had let him go. In an instant, countless questions arose in Rick's mind. Why would the Lord God have a skywing species behind him? Wasn't the skywing species a subordinate of the war god Arceus? Could it be that the Lord God and Arceus worked together? Many questions filled Rick's mind. Seeing Rick's eyes constantly changing, Wuming easily guessed his thoughts. Arceus is dead. I defeated him. Wuming's words shocked Rick. To be able to defeat the war god who was known as the strongest in this world. Did that not mean that this Lord God from another world was even stronger than the war god? Then the skywing species behind you is... Rick looked at Jillian, who was still smiling. Now the skywing species has already defected to my command. These words made Rick lose his composure. Let's put it this way. Just treat it as my reward for defeating the final boss. Wuming smiled at Rick. How can there be such a reward for defeating the Demon King and subduing the Demon King's army? Rick roared angrily. Forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. Rick rubbed his head as if he had a headache, then looked seriously at Wuming. Star Cup. How is it? Hearing Rick's words, Wuming smiled, and then golden ripples appeared beside him. Seeing the golden ripples for the first time, Jillian showed interest and curiously stared at the golden ripples. Wuming reached his hand in, then out again. In an instant the cave, which was originally extremely dark even with the light of the oars, became as bright as the outside. The reason was the cup-shaped object in Wuming's hand, which was emitting endless light. Without a doubt, this was the Star Cup. Jillian and Rick both looked at the cup in shock. This was the symbol of the planet's ownership. Although the two of them had no intention of becoming the planet's master, they could not help but care about the Star Cup. This thing was simply too beautiful. This was Rick's first thought. Rick was deeply immersed in the warm light of the Star Cup, and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 461. So this is the Star Cup. Rick said in a confused manner. Yes, this is the source of the gods' dispute and war, the Star Cup. The entire planet was engulfed in the flames of war. Countless lives were lost. The sky lost its light and was shrouded in darkness. The ground was covered in black ash. The cause of all this was the beautiful little cup that was glowing in front of him. The ownership of the planet. The throne of the only god. Now this war can finally end. Rick clenched his fist and lowered his head. A few drops of tears rolled down his cheeks as he spoke in a choked voice. Looking at Rick in this state, Wuming's Jillian seemed to have realized something. Her eyes were filled with thoughts. At the very least, you humans participated in ending this war. You were the victors from the beginning. Usually, only those who yearn for peace will get what they wish for in the end. Wuming said to Rick with a smile on his face. Also, I believe that even without me, you can save this planet. The possibility of humans isn't some weak force. From the beginning, Wuming had sensed endless possibilities from Rick. The feeling that Rick could end the war even if he did not come to this world lingered in Wuming's heart. If Shiobi met Rick, he would most likely be influenced by Rick's inner feelings. With Rick's opportunity and the Kikai Seed's ability, the possibility of ending the war was quite high. Of course, since Wuming was here, he would naturally choose to help. Wu-ming was glad that he came. Otherwise, even if Rick's plan was perfect, he would still die in the end. The Star Cup did not allow non-gods to become the only god. Wu-ming could feel the rejection from the Star Cup towards Rick and Gapril. It was as if they would turn into ashes if they were to touch it. Wu-ming's hand was wrapped around it. Wu-ming, on the other hand, was judged as neutral by the Star Cup because of the Root Dragon's power. The Star Cup would not allow Wu-ming to become the only god, nor would it harm Wu-ming. It truly treated Wu-ming as neutral. But now there's another big problem. Wu-ming smiled bitterly as he lifted the star-holding cup. Wu-ming started to explain when Gapril's big, curious eyes and Rick's teary eyes looked over. Because I'm not a native god of this world, the Star Cup doesn't recognize me. And the Star Cup can only be inherited by the gods. In other words, whether it's a creation of the gods or a human, they can't control the Star Cup. Wu-ming told them the bad news. Jillian wasn't moved. She wasn't interested in these things, and Rick's expression didn't change much as though he had expected it. You don't seem surprised? Wu-ming asked. While I was waiting, I also guessed that humans might not be able to use the Star Cup. Furthermore, I didn't have any intention of obtaining the Star Cup, so I wasn't surprised, Rick said slowly. Besides, I originally wanted you to become the only god, although it's impossible now. Rick shook his head regretfully. The three fell into silence. Hey Rick, have you ever thought about how gods are born? Wu-ming suddenly asked. Facing Wu-ming's question, Rick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began to ponder. My lord, isn't it because the elven corridor gave birth to a divine seed? Seeing that Rick didn't answer, Jillian spoke up. However, Wu-ming smiled and shook his head. Of course, Wu-ming wouldn't ask such a simple question. Otherwise, Rick wouldn't be deep in thought. What I mean is, why would the elven corridor give birth to a god? Is there a source beyond this? Jillian also fell into deep thought. She wasn't very interested in this kind of thing and had never thought about it before. She simply gave up after thinking about it for a while. If there were no god seeds, then there would only be one kind of creature in the world. Because only humans were born to live on this planet, the other creatures were all created by the gods. Wu-ming's words gave Rick some idea. From what I know, every world has faith. If the gods rely on faith, they can become extremely powerful. Wu-ming began to tell the story. Faith can provide the gods with endless power. The more people believe in the gods, the more powerful the gods will be. However, once the believers disappear, the gods who rely on faith will instantly fall to the bottom. This was basically the reason why the gods in the Type Moon world retreated. People began to understand the magic that could only be used by the gods, and it was Solomon who created the magic. People began to understand mystery, no longer held reverence, no longer believed, and slowly began to believe in science. As for the gods, they can also be born from faith. Wu-ming's words shocked Jillian. My lord, do you mean that the divine seed is born from faith? Then Jillian began to think. The divine seed was born from faith. If that was the case, before there were divine creations and gods, whose faith gave birth to the divine seed? Jillian looked at Rick. Without a doubt, the answer was humans. They had no power, no spirits in their bodies, and were extremely weak. However, they were able to play a role in ending this great war. Although in Jillian's eyes, humans were still insignificant. This war was just humans basking in her lord's glory. You should have thought of it, Rick. The humans' faith gave birth to the gods, and the gods created various races. Wu-ming nodded, then looked at Rick. The forest god, the forge god, the war god, the doubt god, the ocean god. All the gods had their own duties. The war god was born from war, hatred, and blood. The forest god was born from nature, greenery, and plants. The ocean god was born from the ocean, various gods, and so on. Of course I have thought of it. The thoughts of the foolish ancestors turned into a disaster for their descendants. How ironic. Rick clenched his fists tightly. At this point, he finally understood everything. Why were humans different? Why were humans without any special characteristics? Why were humans without gods? Why were humans so weak? It was all because there were only humans on this planet. Because of the human thoughts, This magical planet's mother gave birth to her younger brother in her own body. However, in the end, the younger brothers of the humans created various descendants, and the younger brothers ignored the humans as their elder brother in order to fight for the position of the family head. Or rather, they never thought of themselves as having an elder brother from the beginning. These humans were probably the servants of the family, the younger brothers thought. Then the Earth's mother was scarred, and the only elder brother could not stand it anymore. He began his journey to end this farce of a family power struggle. What a crappy family drama, Wu-Ming mocked. Then Wu-Ming looked at the disappointed Rick. Hey Rick, we need a new god, don't we? Another sentence made Rick realize something. You mean? Chapter 462. Relying on the faith of humans to give birth to another god. Rick naturally understood what Wu-Ming meant. However, there was no god that could be born just like that. Even the other divine beings were born after who knows how many years. However, Wu-Ming shook his head. Rick, you're underestimating yourself. You're the leader of humans, a special human who could attract my attention. Although the human leader's words were a little absolute since there was no telling if there were other humans in this world, Rick had indeed attracted Wu-Ming's attention through the black origin mud in the Star Cup. It was because of his strong belief that Rick's voice could reach Wu-Ming's ears through the black origin mud. Haven't you realized that there's a god like that beside you? Rick's pupils instantly contracted when he heard Wu-Ming's words. The god of games. Rick remembered how he often played chess with that unknown existence when he was a child. Although Rick believed that the god of games existed, he didn't need to have such childish thoughts after becoming the leader of humans. Therefore, Rick never played chess again, nor did he tell anyone about the story of the god of games. It could be said that this was the first time Rick played chess with Shiobi and Wu-Ming in the old capital of the Forest Elves. The god of games, huh? Although it doesn't sound very reliable, I'll leave it to you this world. Wu-Ming nodded, and then threw the Star Cup behind Rick's back. Rick didn't react in time. When he saw Wu-Ming casually throw the Star Cup, he didn't catch it. Gilliar didn't move either, and quietly watched Wu-Ming's actions. The ruined Star Cup looked as fragile as glass, and it was thrown by Wu-Ming just like that. Subsequently, the Star Cup did not fall to the ground as Rick had expected. The Star Cup floated firmly in the air, as if it had been caught by someone. Then, a figure slowly appeared, turning from transparent to solid. This is... Rick stared at the scene in disbelief. She was wearing a green shirt, blue shorts, magenta shoes, and a jacket. There was a pink ribbon on the back of her jacket. She wore a checkered hat with a plum blossom logo printed on it. Under the hat, she had short white hair. Her cheeks were printed with hearts, and her left and right eyes had spades and diamonds respectively in her heterochromatic pupils. As expected of the god of games, his face, eyes, and even his hat were all pictures of poker cards. The god of games, a deity formed from your faith and your will. Wu-Ming explained. I'm Tetu. The god of games held the celestial cup in his hand as he hovered in the air, greeting Rick, who was staring blankly at Tetu. The god of games, does it really exist? Rick was a little excited. Then Wu-Ming mercilessly slapped Tetu's face. At the same time, he is also the weakest god. Outside the cave, Wu-Ming, Rick, Gilliar, and Tetu arrived. Ignoring the fact that Wu-Ming said he was the weakest god, Rick was still a little excited. This was a god who existed by his own will. Although he was born by your will, Tetu is the weakest god because it is only your faith. Wu-Ming explained as if he saw through Rick's thoughts. Although you're not wrong, can't you give me a little face? Tetu chuckled. Although Wu-Ming said he was the weakest, Tetu didn't care, like an optimist. Although what Wu-Ming said was the truth. Well then, I'll take my leave first, everyone. With that, Tetu flew into the sky. Tetu, who had ascended to the throne of the only god, was now preparing to repair this world. It couldn't be said that Tetu was trustworthy, but as a god born from Rick's faith alone, his way of thinking was still simpler than the other gods. At the very least, Tetu, who was born from Rick's faith, was trustworthy. Perhaps it was because his lifelong wish had been fulfilled, or for some other reason, but Rick was now staring blankly at Tetu, who was flying into the sky, as if he was possessed, without saying a word. At that moment, Gillyre spoke while Rick was still in a daze after Tetu left. "My lord, are you really going to give the celestial cup to the weakest just like that?" Gillyre was a Skywing after all, and her mindset of respecting the strong wasn't that easy to change. Wuming, the strongest, had given the greatest spoils of war to the weakest, which made Gillyre very unhappy. But she had no choice. Since it was her master's will, she could only endure it. After all, I can't use it either, can I? I only have one goal, and that is to help the humans of this world. Although the god of games is the weakest god, Tetu's feelings for humans aren't weak. Wuming smiled as he explained to Gillyre while looking at the sky. "Perhaps the mindset of respecting the strong has been deeply ingrained in your mind, but I still want to say that humans aren't weak." However, Gillyre still looked as if she didn't agree with that. Through the thoughts of humans, other gods were born. Are humans weak? Not at all. Gillyre then refuted Wuming's words. "But even so, my lord, humans are on the brink of extinction in this war. This is a fact that you can't refute." Gillyre first bowed to Wuming to atone for her rebuttal, before continuing. "Even so, in the end, the celestial cup was still obtained by a god born from the faith of humans. It can be said that humans have won this war." Wuming smiled. After all, the condition for humans to win was the end of the war, while the condition for other gods to win was to obtain the celestial cup. "I defeated Arthas. This is the result. I am the victor. Now humans are the victors, and the victors are the strong." Gillyre then fell silent. Whatever you say, my lord." As if throwing a tantrum, Gillyre snorted and didn't say anything else. Wuming looked at Gillyre with a bitter smile, then said with a smile, "Well, you still have a long way to go in terms of understanding humans. I'm not asking you to have any desire to protect humans, I just want you to acknowledge other races. The mindset of respecting the strong isn't suitable for you who are my guardians." Yes, my lord." After ending the conversation between master and servant, Wuming began to admire the reconstruction of this world. Not created by anyone, not expected by anyone, not prayed by anyone. Tetu's voice began to sound in the sky. The nameless race that evolved from beasts to bipedal walking with their own consciousness, and obtained intelligence, humans. Tetu's voice wasn't loud, but it was as if the entire world could hear him. "For such a race, I, as the only god, grant you a name. Humanity, race of humans." The moment the humans were given their names, the sky of this planet lit up. The dark clouds all disappeared, and the sun was exposed. Plants instantly covered the earth, butterflies fluttered among the flowers, and birds soared freely in the sky. The entire world seemed to be alive again. Not only that, but most of the terrain was also changed, and there were more chess pieces on the ground. Next, the Exceed 16 races, who claim to have intelligence. You will swear to the covenant as your worship, abide by the rules of the 10 covenants, and start a new game in this new world. Well then, let's continue the game. Listening to Tetu's speech and looking at the land that was restored to life, Wuming smiled helplessly. Well done, but all I can say is that as expected of the god of games. So my lord, do you want the celestial cup back? Gillyre egged him on. Well, looking at the tears of joy flowing out of Rick's eyes as he looked down at the land that was restored to life, Wuming turned to leave. Since I'm not interested, I'll leave the rest to the players. Chapter 463. Wuming slowly walked on the land that was overflowing with life, admiring the scenery around him. The trees were lush, butterflies were dancing, and all kinds of small animals were coming and going. Birds were flying freely in the sky. Arriving at a highland, Wuming looked down at the plains in front of him and sighed. You don't say. Controlling the Star Cup is really like controlling the ownership of a planet. In just an instant, the entire planet changed. It was as if Tetu had entered an editing interface. He formatted the dying planet and gave it new life. At that moment, Shiobi, who was following beside Wuming, spoke. Shiobi, I like the current planet. Shiobi looked at the land in front of her with a happy expression. Wuming couldn't help but look at his sister, who was smiling so innocently. After Tetu reorganized the world, he set the 10 covenants. Wuming didn't pay attention to the content of the covenants, only knowing that they were related to the game. Wuming couldn't help but complain about Tetu again, as expected of the god of games. In short, the entire world had become a world where everything was decided through the game. This way humans wouldn't be deliberately harmed. After that, Rick brought the spirits back to the village. Seeing her brother return safely, Crone was so happy that she hugged her brother and cried for a while. Wuming, on the other hand, quietly cancelled his clone and came to the village. After all, in everyone's eyes, the siblings Villo and Shiobi had been staying in the village all this time. By the way, during the time he stayed in the village, Crone came to Wuming many times. Of course, it wasn't what you imagined. Crone came to Wuming to find out what her brother was doing. Of course, Wuming deliberately avoided this question every time. After some time, Crone gave up on getting information from Wuming and turned to Shiobi. After spending so much time together, Crone understood the relationship between Wuming and Shiobi, a kind and capable brother and a shy and innocent sister who always hid behind her brother. In Crone's impression, Shiobi and Wuming had never been separated and were always together. Therefore, Crone thought that Shiobi must know something about him. After all, she was a child and it was easy to get information from her. That was Crone's idea, but reality slapped her in the face. Shiobi, who had been instructed by Wuming, was naturally feigning ignorance and not telling Crone. Although Crone wasn't happy that she couldn't get anything out of Shiobi after half a day. Thanks to this, her relationship with Shiobi, they were like sisters. Thanks to Crone, Wuming, but Shiobi. Even if Crone was willing to accept Shiobi after knowing her identity, it didn't mean that others were willing to accept her. Therefore, after a few days of recuperation in the village, Wuming decided to leave with Shiobi. He would let the image of a kind and reliable brother and a pure and timid sister be fixed in the hearts of Crone and the others. Wuming used the excuse of Shiobi and I are going back to our hometown, and the current world is decided by the game, so there's no need to worry about safety, to leave with Shiobi. Wuming still remembered the scene of everyone sending them off. Crone hugged Shiobi and cried, while Rick and Wuming shook hands. Rick knew that once Wuming left, it was very likely that he would never see him again in this lifetime. Take care, Villo. You too, Rick. There weren't many words, nor were there any words of gratitude. With just a few words, the two of them let go of their clenched hands. Then, under everyone's reluctance and blessings, Wuming took Shiobi and rode the horse of this world that Crone and the others had given them and headed into the distance. After traveling for a while, Wuming released the horse and let it return to nature. Then Wuming and Shiobi walked on the ground. After all, the two of them really didn't need any means of transportation. How does it feel to gain feelings, Shiobi? Wuming gently touched Shiobi's head and asked. Shiobi put her hand on the power furnace in front of her chest and slowly answered Wuming. Shiobi can't say. But Shiobi is very happy, brother. Is that so? That's enough, my sister. Looking up, Wuming felt the wind blowing against his face and said in a relaxed tone. I'm preparing to leave this world. What about you? Wuming asked. Shiobi understood what Wuming meant. She was abandoned by the Kikai seed and the possibility of her returning was not high. Therefore, Wuming wanted to ask if she wanted to go with him. Then Shiobi shook her head. Shiobi is preparing to return to the Kikai seed and pass on her feelings to everyone. Shiobi stared at the pair of mechanical eyes. Although it was mechanical, it was full of charm and emotions like a living creature. This is going to be a tough road. Are you ready? Wuming once again patted Shiobi's head and exhorted his sister like an elder brother. Yes, Shiobi is ready. Shiobi will definitely let all the Kikai seed gain feelings, brother. Shiobi looked at Wuming with a smile. Through those eyes, Wuming read the firm belief. Wuming smiled and then activated the soul of words. A person with a supreme protective divine power. God protects him, the devil hates him, and no enemy can approach him. He is like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. Then, through his hand that had yet to move away from Shiobi's head, Wuming transmitted his protection into Xiaobi's body. Feeling the increasingly powerful power in her body, Xiaobi was at a loss. Wuming continued to increase the power of the protection. About half an hour later, Wuming stopped the protection. With this protection, even if Arthas revives and uses a divine strike, it will be enough to withstand it. Wuming let go of his hand that was touching Xiaobi's head. Then Wuming half squatted down and looked into Xiaobi's eyes. With your brother's protection, you can rest assured and do what you want to do, Xiaobi. Feeling Wuming's power in her body, Xiaobi touched the core on her chest and said, "Brother, do you still have the thing that Xiaobi gave you?" Xiaobi asked, "That metal ball, right? How could I have lost it?" Wuming smiled. Then he activated the golden ripples beside him. Wuming reached in and took out a fist-sized metal ball. He handed it to Xiaobi. Xiaobi took the ball and placed it on her chest. Then the ball seemed to come to life and emitted light. Xiaobi's core was visibly split into two, and half of it was sucked into the ball. Then Xiaobi removed the ball and handed it to Wuming. "Xiaobi has your power, so the core no longer restricts Xiaobi. Xiaobi has divided the core into two, and half of it has been stored in here. Brother, carrying her is like carrying Xiaobi." But Wuming hesitated. Logically speaking, as long as the core of the Kekai seed was not destroyed, she was not dead. Xiaobi had given half of her heart to Wuming. This made Wuming feel flattered. This was simply putting her life in someone else's hands. Brother also said that the world is not dangerous now, and I believe in my brother. Xiaobi looked at Wuming, her eyes full of expectation. She believed that Wuming could protect Xiaobi's core. This was what Wuming read through Xiaobi's eyes. "Give me the heart. I will never let it go for the rest of my life." Xiaobi too, with your brother's power, Xiaobi will not let go of your brother. The wind blew, brushing the grass on the ground. The sun shone gently on the brother and sister on the ground. Everything was so beautiful. Chapter 464. Xiaobi revealed Kekai's equipment and flew into the sky to leave. Wuming did not move, remaining on the high ground overlooking the land. "My lord, are you leaving?" With a spatial ripple, Gopril's voice came from behind Wuming. Gopril was a skywing, after all, so Wuming had her avoid arousing suspicion and not appear in front of Crone and the others. And because the atmosphere between Wuming and Xiaobi was just right, Gopril tactfully did not appear. Once Xiaobi left, Gopril appeared from space. "What? Are you excited because you can't wait to go to my world?" Wuming half-joked. "Well, a little." Gopril smiled, the wings on her back trembling, showing how unsettled she was. Alas, Wuming cruelly shattered Gopril's fantasy. "For the time being, I probably won't summon you. Just obediently stay on Abant." How could it be like this? Gopril was like a deflated balloon, powerlessly slumping to the ground. This world has already become meaningless. "Master, please hurry and take me away." Gopril was like a canary in a cage, looking at Wuming with a pitiful gaze. That was because Te2 had turned this world into a game where everything was decided. That meant that there would be no more killing. This was hell for the Skywings, who loved to kill and snatch kills, as well as the god-slaying weapons. As a cute girl, it's not good to always talk about killing and fighting. You need to learn how to cultivate your character. How about this? Tell Azrael to give an order to all the Skywings that the new generation of Skywings is no longer a killing machine, but a collector of culture. The current mission of the Skywings is to collect the culture and knowledge of this world. Whether it's to collect books or use magic to record them, gather as much knowledge as you can. The moment he said this, Gopril became interested. She had always liked all kinds of culture. By the way, after collecting the culture, the Skywings need to study it and learn the advantages of it. Don't be like bookworms who only know how to copy. "Yes, my lord, your subordinate will do it right away," Gopril replied playfully, then fled into space and disappeared. Wuming smiled helplessly and shook his head. Then, Wuming said to no one, "Aren't you going to come out and meet me? After all, I'm your benefactor who helped you ascend to the throne of the one god." After Wuming finished speaking, a child's voice sounded. "Haha, are you leaving?" Do you still need me to send you off? Taetu appeared in front of Wuming and laughed happily. It had to be said that after becoming the only god, Taetujin could be said to be an omnipotent god. However, he could only be omnipotent on this planet. In any case, the current Wuming had no confidence in defeating the current Taetuesday. If he were to leave this world, while he would not be completely useless, he would still be much weaker. At the very least, in another world, Wuming would be able to grind Taetu to the ground. There's nothing wrong with the celestial cup, right? Wuming ignored Taetu's joke and asked about serious matters. No, there's nothing left of that black origin soil you mentioned. If not for the fact that there are some traces left inside the celestial cup, I'm afraid I would have thought that you were lying to me. Taetu was like an optimist as he happily answered Wuming. Incidentally, Taetu was still lying down in the air, using his arm as a pillow. It's best if you be careful. If you get corrupted by that thing, we might become mortal enemies, Wuming warned. Ha ha ha, even if that happens, I'll only play games with you. I don't like fighting and killing. Taetu was not wrong. If Taetu was really corrupted by the black origin soil, with Taetu's spirit, the black origin soil would not be able to turn Taetu evil. It might even make Taetu an even more powerful good god. However, even if Taetu was a good god, he would still treat Wuming as an enemy. That was why the black origin soil was so frightening. If the black origin soil was allowed to corrupt all worlds, then Wuming would really become an enemy of the entire world. Forget it, I'm really an idiot for worrying about you. Wuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. Well then, I'll be leaving first. Help me take care of the humans, god of games. With that, Wuming's figure disappeared from where he was. Don't worry, I'm very fair, Taetu said with a smile, but that pink face of his was black no matter how you looked at it. And so, Wuming ended his journey in this world, and returned to the dimensional tunnel. Once inside, Wuming was not in a hurry to head to the world of singularities, and instead flew out of the tunnel. Now the flaws of this body could be seen. His authority incarnation had too many limitations, and was not powerful enough. Even the divine blade of salvation that was one with Wuming was only a replica in this body, and was not as powerful as before. Therefore, Wuming decided to return this body to the furnace to reconstruct and evolve it. Wuming soon returned to the root, and nothing happened because Kalas was there. Lord Wuming. Kalas greeted from the head of Wuming's main body. You've worked hard, Kalas. Wuming said. You're too kind. Kalas replied, flattered. Wuming smiled and didn't say anything more. The relationship between the two of them was already beyond the point of needing thanks. Then, Wuming revealed the true form of this body, which was the body of the root dragon. Wuming looked at his main body, which was much smaller than before, and was a little troubled. So it's time to level up. Then Wuming's consciousness disappeared from this body and returned to his main body. Wuming, who had returned to his main body, opened his eyes, and an indescribable aura filled the entire root. Then the dragon horns on Wuming's head glowed, and the golden chains around him danced. If my main body encountered the Star Cup's consciousness, I might be able to kill it with one claw. Wuming felt his current strength and said confidently, let's see which singularity Chaldea has reached. With that, Wuming's huge ruby-like dragon eyes turned golden, and something invisible flowed in his eyes. Not long after Wuming's eyes turned golden, Wuming's eyes turned red again. The ocean, huh? This should be the third singularity. So far, Chaldea had reached the third singularity, and it seemed that it was almost done. This was all because of Wuming's clairvoyance that evolved in his root. Wuming had just seen Chaldea conquer one singularity after another after leaving Winterwood City. The 100 Years' War, the City of Seven Hills, and Oceanus from Greek mythology. Although Wuming did not stay in Rick's world for long, it seemed that the flow of time between worlds was different. Chaldea had already completed 2 singularities, and the third seemed to be almost done. Well, I'll leave it to them for now. Through his clairvoyance, Wuming also saw the vampire that Wuming summoned for Olga Marie. She had contributed a lot on this journey. Not only that, but Gadatsi also met a lot of reliable servants. I'll level up my backup machine first. As he spoke, Wu Ming began to move his hands and feet on the huge dragon body lying beside him. Chapter 465. Inside the Root of Origin, Wu Ming had been upgrading his own body for some time. Because there were many things that needed to be upgraded, after Wu Ming came up with a general format, he put the body aside, and then channeled the power of the Root of Origin into the body, allowing it to be modified by the Root of Origin's energy. That's it for now. Wu Ming nodded the huge dragon head in satisfaction. Chaldea should have finished conquering the fourth singularity, right? How about I go to the next singularity and wait for them? Wu Ming thought, and activated clairvoyance again, spying on Chaldea and the others. Oh, the mastermind has come out early. How unbecoming of a big boss, Wu Ming said sarcastically. Then Wu Ming looked around. I don't think the Root of Origin will attack so coincidentally. I'll go meet that magic king. With that, Wu Ming flapped his wings and flew out of the Root of Origin. But then, traces of black matter appeared outside the Root of Origin. In the fourth singularity of the M-Moon world, under the magic fog city of the underworld, in an underground space similar to Winterwood City, for huge pillars of flesh with eyes released powerful magic power, wreaking havoc in this underground space. If Wu Ming was here, he would definitely recognize this thing. The demon god pillar that Lev once transformed into was such a disgusting thing. The residual magic power in the space proved that a few servants had just left. In front of the pillars of flesh, many people stood there. Wu Ming knew most of the people present, such as Gadotsi, Matthew, Pamilia, Mordred, and the others. They were all nervously watching a blue-haired servant with the body of a child talk to the mastermind, controlling the pillars of flesh. Opposite them stood a white-haired man in ancient Israeli clothing. Just by standing there, his powerful magic power increased the pressure on everyone. The demon god pillars were arranged behind the man like stars surrounding the moon, and the identity of this white-haired man was already beyond doubt. The only one who could control the demon god pillars was that demon king Solomon. Having had enough of the boring conversation, Solomon shook his head helplessly. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I have to say that human weapons are just like humans. Both of them are hopeless. Upon hearing this, Matthew immediately raised his shield and stood in front of Gadotsi. Even though his legs were trembling, Matthew still firmly guarded Gadotsi. Instead, it was Pamilia who went against her usual arrogance. She had an unusually calm expression and didn't say anything, as if she was waiting for the right moment. Oh yeah, are they going to attack us? The blue-haired man said in a low voice, not at all afraid that he was about to leave. However, this did not mean that others would not be angry. Tisk, you really make people angry, Mordred said irritably. She then raised the Emperor's sword in her hand and prepared to attack. That being said, even she couldn't guarantee that she would be able to take a blow from the Magic King. The servants who left before were the examples. Destroy them, demon god pillars. Solomon just finished speaking, and the four meat pillars that were wreaking havoc in this underground space began to dance. Immediately, when everyone was at their wits' end, there was a strong fluctuation in the space. A huge dragon claw appeared in this underground space. As if catching an earthworm, the four demon god pillars were uprooted and then directly crushed. Bang! The demon god pillars didn't even leave behind a whale. All of them turned into pure magic and dissipated in the air. Gadotsi and the others looked at the huge dragon claw that was still there with a dumbfounded look. Obviously they didn't react. However, Pamilia relaxed, as if the reinforcements had come. Mordred said in a displeased tone after sensing the restlessness of the bloodline in her body. TSK, we're too late. Mordred complained, but her tone had already relaxed. Then, when Gadotsi and the others were wondering who saved them, Solomon opened his mouth. I didn't expect you to come here with your original body. Same here. Didn't you also come here with your original body? Wu Ming's voice came into this space. This voice is Assassin Senior. Because he used his original voice, Matthew easily recognized Wu Ming's voice. Immediately, the huge dragon claw turned into magic and landed on the ground. Wu Ming, wearing assassin's uniform, appeared in front of Gadotsi and the others. Assassin. Gudatsi shouted excitedly and threw herself on Wu Ming's back. Yes, yes, I'm here. Also, a girl should be reserved. Don't throw yourself on others so easily. Gudatsi nodded and obediently came down from Wu Ming's back and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. This couldn't be blamed on Gudatsi. The horror brought by Solomon was not something a little girl who had just become a magician for less than half a year could bear. It could be said that if it wasn't for Matthew's ability to protect her, Gudatsi would probably have mental problems now. That's because you're always reliable, assassin, Gudatsi smiled. It seemed that Wu Ming left a strong impression on Gudatsi when he burned and polluted Winterwood City. There should be a limit to how much you can ignore me. Then the Magician King roared out angrily. After comforting the frightened Gudatsi, Wu Ming looked at Solomon. You just wanted to kill them, right? The mastermind behind the burning of human rights. Because everyone already knew that the other party was the mastermind behind the burning of human rights, they were not surprised that Wu Ming knew about it. I didn't want to kill them, after all they are no threat to me, but those people over there have your aura. I can't endure it any longer. Solomon said violently, almost to the point of roaring. Solomon's eyes were blood red at this moment, and his mouth was cracked open like a monster. Black threads also appeared on Solomon's body, and countless magic power was released as if it was free. Wu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. Taking a closer look, these are not threads, these are all small black mud. Because of the black mud, Solomon had a strong killing intent towards Wu Ming, and this killing intent implicated Gudatsi and others. Then do you want to do it now? I don't mind. Wu Ming became serious, and began to release magic power from his body, forming a situation where he was equal to Solomon. But in an instant Solomon calmed down, and his eyes and mouth returned to normal. I really forgot myself. These things are powerful, but they affect my mood too easily. Wu Ming took a closer look, and the black mud on his body disappeared, or rather, it was sucked back into Solomon's body. You can really restrain yourself. Among the enemies I've met, there's not one like you. Everyone who was related to the black mud would not let Wu Ming go, as if they wanted to kill him. Then they would be killed by Wu Ming. If they could calm down, they could still have a big impact on Wu Ming. Just like the consciousness of the Star Cup, if it could leave first, and then give the Star Cup to Kainas, then it would be the only god by using Kainas' body, and Wu Ming in that body would not have the ability to beat it. After all, even the weakest Teto became the only god. Wu Ming did not dare to say that he could beat him. From this, it could be seen that the Magic King was able to suppress his desire for Wu Ming, and could be said to be the ultimate big boss. That's all for now. I'll bring you some good stuff at the next singularity. After saying that, as if afraid that his desire for Wu Ming would flare up again, the Magic King left. It was good that he left. This made Wu Ming worry less. After all, if they fought, Gudatsi and the others behind him would be a burden. Then Gudatsi and the others, who had been silent all this time, began to ask questions. Chapter 466. Hey, who is Assassin to be able to force Solomon to retreat? Do Assassin and Mordred know each other? Why do I feel like Mordred knows you, Assassin? Do you know that, Solomon? I feel like there's a grudge between the two of you. Assassin. Let's stop for a moment. Wu Ming covered Gudatsi's mouth with a headache and stopped Gudatsi from asking any more questions. Wu Ming could understand the excitement when there were so many unknowns and someone who could answer them, but it was still better to let Gudatsi calm down. Then, Matthew said weakly from the side. Senior Assassin, let go of Senior first. Senior is about to suffocate. Wu Ming looked at Gudatsi, who had turned into a mosquito coil, and quickly let go of the hand that was covering Gudatsi's mouth and Gudatsi's nose. I'm saved. Thank you so much, Matthew. Gudatsi looked relieved and touched Matthew's little head. This kind of action made Mashu's face blush. On the other side, Pamela flapped her little wings and came in front of Wu Ming. Then why did thou come so late? Pamela asked Wu Ming with a haughty expression. You stinky brat. That guy isn't someone you can question. Mordred, on the other hand, had an unhappy look on her face. Ha! What right do thou have to control me? Oh, you're so protective of this guy. Could it be that thou and this guy have an unspeakable relationship? Pamela was angry at first, then started to tease Mordred. It seems like the lesson from before wasn't enough. Mordred raised her royal sword and looked like she was going to fight with Pamela. That was the one who hasn't been taught a lesson. Pamela showed her small canine teeth, not to be outdone. From their conversation, Wuming deduced that the two of them might have fought. And it ended in a draw. Their relationship is really good, Wuming said faintly, no longer caring about the two. That being said, the two of them have caused a lot of trouble. At that moment, the blue-haired servant spoke. My name is Hans Christian Andersen. Just call me Andersen, great unknown being. It's rare for Mr. Andersen to be so serious, Matthew said in surprise. It's just a necessary greeting. Don't make me sound like those two guys over there. Andersen shook his head helplessly. In the end, Mordred and Parmelia were still facing each other. At this moment, Roman's voice came from Gadatsi's wrist. Although I know that everyone has a lot to say, let's hurry up and retrieve the Holy Grail. This underground space is about to collapse. Because of the confrontation between Wuming and Solomon, the originally unstable underground space became even more unstable. Sure enough, as soon as Roman finished speaking, the underground space began to collapse. Doctor, you really have a crow's mouth, Matthew complained, quickly ran to the location of the Holy Grail, put down his shield, and began to retrieve the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail has been retrieved. I'm sorry, assassin, although I would like to talk to you. We have to hurry back to Chaldea. After all, once the Holy Grail was retrieved, the singularity would begin to restore itself. If they didn't leave, then they would be killed by the self-correcting power of history. And now, Andersen and Mordred's body began to dissipate. After all, the Holy Grail was retrieved. Hey, I'll settle this with you next time, Mordred said to Pamela fiercely. I'll wait for thee. Pamela also replied, not to be outdone. I can finally leave. With him here, there's nothing for me to do. Goodbye, everyone. Andersen sighed with a melancholy and rejoiced expression, then accelerated the speed of his body's disappearance. Mordred looked at Wuming, then snorted and disappeared as well. So dishonest, Wuming smiled. Then, I'll start the ray shift now. Everyone get ready, Roman said through Gadatsi's wristwatch. However, Wuming laughed mischievously. Then how about I go with you? Chaldea control room. As soon as Pamela came back, she returned to her small room with the excuse that she was tired and needed to rest. Gadatsi, Matthew and Wuming, the three stood together in front of Roman, who was dumbfounded. I didn't expect you to have such an ability, Roman said gloomily. Wuming did come back with Gadatsi and the others, but he did not use the ray shift. Instead, he relied on his own ability to fly back with Gadatsi, who had been turned into ray shift. Now, although Wuming had not reached the state of omnipotence in the use of time and space, he was almost there. Because he had stayed in the route for a long time, Wuming was almost reaching adulthood. It could be said that if Wuming wanted to fight Solomon just now, he would have a great chance of winning. Well, if I ask for the reason, you should know. Wuming's eyes seemed to see through everything as he stared at Roman. Haha. Is that so? Roman wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said nervously. I won't be in a hurry to leave. Tachika, Matthew, you two go back and rest first, Wuming said to Gadatsi and Matthew. Let's go, Senior. Senior needs to rest. Oh. Okay then, see you later. Gadatsi, who saw that Wuming wanted to talk to Roman alone, left with Matthew. Although there were other staff in the control room, Wuming only needed to use a little trick to let them hear his conversation with Roman. Initially, I felt that there was something wrong with you. Now that I see it, I understand the truth, Wuming said in confusion. I'm just a human now, a human who is working hard to restore humanity. Roman didn't feel nervous as before and calmly answered Wuming. If that's what you want. Wuming shrugged, indicating that he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Actually, I want to ask something about you, Roman said after a moment. Is it about why I only showed up now? Or do you want to ask if I will follow Tachika and the others to attack singularities? Wuming could almost guess what Roman wanted to ask. After all, There were only a few questions he could ask. Both, and if possible, I hope you can help us, Roman said seriously. Of course, Wu Ming answered without hesitation. Huh. This surprised Roman. Didn't I say before that although I have my own enemies, they are generally the same as you? Then Wu Ming smiled. And I also like humans. Chapter 467. About half an hour later, Gadotsi and Matthew, who couldn't wait to have sex with Wu Ming, went to the control room together. Why is Assassin missing? Doctor, do you know where he went? Gadotsi asked Roman, who was working at the control console in the control room, when she saw that Wu Ming was missing. Could it be that Senior Assassin went to Chaldea alone? Matthew asked in confusion. After all, if he wasn't here, it was very likely that he had gone to other places in Chaldea. After all, Chaldea was quite big. No, Assassin suddenly remembered something and left Chaldea. Wu Ming and Roman knew each other very well for some reason, so Wu Ming told Roman his name. Assassin left? Gadotsi said rather gloomily. Although Matthew didn't say anything, her sullen expression revealed her uneasiness. Then, Roman smiled when he saw the expressions on the two girls' faces. But Assassin told me to tell you that he will help you at the next singularity. Then, you can have a good gathering. Really? That's great. I have a lot of questions to ask Assassin, Gadotsi said happily. After all, things like the relationship with Mordred, the mysterious dragon claw, the ability to suddenly appear, the ability to appear without the help of the Holy Grail, and so on were all very attractive to Guda. Not only that, but Gadotsi also paid more attention to the super mysterious identity of Wu Ming after meeting Stheno on the invisible island of the second singularity, and Euryale on the third singularity. Of course, this was also closely related to the deep impression that Wu Ming left on Gadotsi in Winterwood. Strictly speaking, Wu Ming was the first servant that Gadotsi had ever met that was gentle, reliable, powerful, and wise, unlike any other servants. Like a big brother next door, Wu Ming constantly attracted Gadotsi's attention. Since that's the case, let's quickly start the strategy for the fifth singularity. I'm ready, Gadotsi said in high spirits. You're so motivated? Roman was surprised. Matthew also looked at Gadotsi in confusion. Although Gadotsi usually didn't hate the strategy for singularities, she didn't like it either. It was the first time that Matthew saw his senior so motivated. After all, we met Assassin he. Gadotsi scratched her head embarrassedly. At that moment, Wu Ming's little fangirl was born. Although you're ready to attack the next singularity, unfortunately, we haven't completely locked on to the next singularity, so we'll have to wait a little longer. Roman and the other staff members were also very concerned about the singularity. After all, it was the future of mankind. However, they still hadn't fully grasped the location of the singularity. By the way, before Wu Ming left, he left some information about the next singularity. However, because it was in a hurry, the information he left behind only played a supporting role. After all, Wu Ming's method of searching for singularities was completely different from Chaldea's method. Although they were similar, they could only play a supporting role. This was also why Chaldea and the others were able to lock onto the fifth singularity so quickly as soon as Gadotsi returned from the fourth singularity. By the way, you didn't disturb the director, right? Roman asked quietly. Gadotsi quickly waved her hand. No, after all, the director just started. What's the word again? Yes, she's in seclusion. We didn't disturb her. Matthew nodded. This allowed Roman to breathe a sigh of relief. Ever since Olga Marie returned to Chaldea, she had assumed the position of director and was in charge of the overall situation. However, it seemed like the heavens were playing a joke on her. After returning to Chaldea, Olga Marie was unable to perform the ray shift. This made her, who was preparing to go to the first singularity with Gadotsi, stay in the frame like a fool after the ray shift was performed. In addition, although Pamilia was not very obedient, at least she was helpful to Gadotsi and the others in attacking singularities. Therefore, Olga Marie decided to let her follow Gadotsi, while she stayed in Chaldea to command. But after a long time, Olga Marie found that Roman was completely capable of taking over her position. And there was also the second servant summoned by Chaldea to assist him. Therefore, Olga Marie decided to study the third method. She had nothing to do, and the third method was close at hand. Olga Marie was not a pedantic person, so she did not hesitate and directly began to study the third method. She had no choice but to study it. Otherwise, she could only be the spirit behind the Holy Grail, unable to escape for the rest of her life. Since then, Olga Marie would go into seclusion from time to study the third method. Coincidentally, a few days ago, Olga Marie just went into seclusion, and now Wu Ming came to Chaldea. The director is very persistent about Assassin Sama. If she knew that Assassin Sama came to Chaldea, I don't know what the director would do. Matthew said embarrassedly. One had to know that Sundra's temper tantrums came without warning. Olga Marie had lost her temper several times because of her dreams about Wu Ming and her dissatisfaction with Pamilia. Basically, Gadotsi and Matthew were in the singularity, so only Roman suffered, which made Roman have a headache. It was a sad story. It's better not to tell her. You're right. Yeah, while Roman and the others were chatting, Wu Ming encountered a small situation. At the door of the root, his home, Wu Ming looked at the entrance of the root where a lot of black mud had poured in, and there were still countless black mud outside. He was unusually depressed. He had only left for a short while. How could his home be raided? Left with no choice, Wu Ming temporarily cut off control of his main body and let Collis move his body a little in the air. He instantly flew to the backup machine inside the root. Opening his ruby dragon eyes that were identical to his main body, Wu Ming looked gloomily at the black mud that was beginning to erode the root, trying to take root again. He shook his head with a headache. Fortunately, I held back. Otherwise, it would really be over this time. As Wu Ming spoke, he activated the power of the root all over his body, and the safety device inside the root was activated. Zap zap zap. In an instant, countless lightning flashed, and countless black mud were destroyed and evaporated by the lightning produced by the root. However, the black mud was still a product of the root, and since it had taken root inside the root, it was not that easy to destroy. Roar! Then Wu Ming controlled his body to fly up. His whole body emitted the lightning of salvation mixed with the power of the root, and kept sweeping away the black mud of the root. The black mud of the root was not to be trifled with either. It immediately turned into huge waves that swept toward Wu Ming. Even Wu Ming had to take these two attacks seriously. I'll definitely guard my home obediently from now on. After muttering in his heart, Wu Ming seemed to have made an important decision. Using the power of the root and lightning all over his body, Wu Ming charged into the waves of black mud and exploded. Boom. The explosion affected all the black mud inside the root. Even the root, which did not have a fixed form, seemed to be shaking. That's right, Wu Ming self-destructed. With the thought of, "You're ruthless, I hate you more," Wu Ming directly used himself as the starting point to detonate the lightning of salvation mixed with the power of the root, completely washing away the black mud of the root. The entire root seemed to have been washed clean by Wu Ming's self-destruction, and looked very clean. Even the entrance of the root was blown open by the explosion. At this moment, Wu Ming's main body in the outside world opened his eyes, flapped his wings, and flew into the root before the black mud of the root could reassemble. You're tuning into the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.